conducted pursuant to the provisions of the governor's executive order, which suspended certain requirements of the Brown Act. Attendees will be muted until they are called upon for public comment. To make a public comment, use the raise hand icon on your smart device or desktop computer, or dial *9 if you're using just your telephone. Please listen carefully for the chair or city clerk to address you by name or number, and for the audible Zoom notification that you have been unmuted. Once you begin your public comment, your 3 minutes will begin. We're not going to be really holding to the 3 minutes unless this meeting really starts to drag out or conversations are going nowhere. If you prefer to submit comment in writing, please email it to iwerby@ci.cloverdale.ca.us. If you commit, that part doesn't matter to us, we're good. So there we are. We're moving on to the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Land's introductions. I'll go first if you'd like, unless David, I heard you say you wanted to introduce us, so if you want to do that, I'll leave it open to you.
Okay, well, Chair Lands, it's at your pleasure, but I guess I just want to say thank you for reconvening the Cloverdale Community Homelessness Advisory Group, or the got tongue-tied there, Homelessness Community Advisory Group for Cloverdale. We last convened this meeting back in February of 2020, and of course, we were impacted by COVID. And since that time, we've had a number of changes in the organization of the group. And as you can see, Councilmember Lance has joined us on our city council and has been designated the chair of this committee. And also joining us is our Vice Mayor Marta Cruz, who previously sat on the committee and was very involved. So with the reorganization and some of the changes that have occurred over the last year in developments, we've really sought this meeting. The goal of this meeting was kind of get up to date and recap the efforts that we've previously completed, and also recognize that we have some new names and new faces that are part of this effort. And so with that, Chair Lands, I'll turn it over to you to do self introductions and Vice Mayor Cruz.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. As David Kelly said, my name is Todd Lands. I was lucky enough to be on this committee as a school board representative for the first 2 meetings. And so I get to hit the ground running, but at the same time, there's a lot of new faces to me and people I don't know as well as you probably don't know me. So I'm a 43-year-long Cloverdale resident. I am vested in this town, and I look forward to doing what is best for it. And that's why I thank you guys up front for everything you are doing and have been doing. And I look forward to making this committee work well for our community to help the homelessness issue that we have at hand. Vice Chair.
Yes, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, Chair Lance, and I want to welcome everyone. I also want to thank everybody for being present, especially elected officials and all interested parties in this very important conversation for Cloverdale. In conjunction, I need to make you aware that in conjunction with City Manager David Kelly, I have been serving as Cloverdale representative in the county ad hoc on homelessness regarding governance issues in the region. And it has been necessary to strongly advocate for Cloverdale, given our geographical distance from other cities in the county and having a small population comparison with other jurisdictions, both on the homeless and also in terms of our constituency. Equally, it has been important to learn about other cities' problems and approaches. In general, we are all facing a problem, and that is efficient and prompt access to services. So the issue of access relates to jurisdictions as well as people at the brink of homelessness or experiencing homelessness, access to financial system, housing, healthcare, and especially mental health. So as a town, as a city, we must acknowledge that all initiatives currently are regional efforts, and knowledge of national legal mandates are necessary. We have to be able to do what is good for our city, but at the same time, we need to comply with our regional efforts and national legal mandates. And this is why we have our legal advisor here. And of course, this presents great complexity. However, the efforts and approach or strategy is one of not policing, but support, assistance, and awareness. So as an affected jurisdiction, I encourage you to explore the meaning of what these approaches, perspectives, and strategies mean for us in Cloverdale as we work on mutual collaboration. So thank you very much. And I really look forward to continuing to learn about this issue, because it changes pretty much by the week, given the different legal appeals that exist in the country. So thank you. And I look forward to continuing to represent Cloverdale and to work with Councilmember Lance on all these issues impacting our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Appreciate that. I would like to do introductions of all the group members if we could. Irene, if you could control that, it'd be great. If you could maybe tell each person who to go or put them in their list, since you have a nice long list of members of this group. It'd be great if you could just have them give a quick introduction.
Sure. So I'm going to go in the order of my screen here. So Alex, you can go ahead.
I'm Alex Mogg. I'm an attorney at Myers Nava, and I work with Jose Sanchez, who is the city attorney of Cloverdale, and we work closely with police department and David and his team, on a whole range of issues, including homelessness and code enforcement issues.
Thank you. And then David.
Thank you, Irene. And again, welcome Community Advisory Group members. I'm David Kelly, City Manager. We're excited that we're able to re-kickstart this process and work with Chair Lands and Vice Mayor Cruz to bring back this planning effort. And our goal is to complete it and develop a strategic plan that provides a framework for addressing the issue and impacts of homelessness within our community. So thank you. I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you. Margaret.
Hello, I'm Margaret Slike. I'm the Executive Director at Reach for Home, and I'm excited to be a part of this advisory committee to do whatever we can to support Cloverdale and to support the unsheltered community members there. So thank you, and thanks for all you do.
Thank you. Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie Howell with Alexander Valley Healthcare. I'm the CEO here, and anxious to get busy in addressing the homeless issue in Cloverdale.
Thank you. Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Thompson, the Assistant City Manager and Community Development Director, and I've been working alongside David for the past couple of years to get the framework up and running and present it to the community in a way where we can get input and shape it to what's appropriate for Cloverdale. So we're ready to go. Thank you.
Michael Velasquez.
Good afternoon. I represent St. Vincent de Paul out of St. Peter's Church. For the last 3 years, we've been providing for those in need in Cloverdale and throughout northern Sonoma County. Was original participant of the first homeless community advisory group. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Ferguson.
Hello, I'm Jason Ferguson, Chief of Police here in Cloverdale. I've been here since August 5th of 2019. And even prior to coming here, I knew that homelessness and the concerns in the community were the top priority, and they remain there. So I'm looking forward to getting this kicked back up and finding out what we can do collaboratively.
Thank you. Blake.
Hi, my name is Blake Manning, and I'm a behavioral health counselor at Alexander Valley Healthcare, specializing in substance abuse counseling. I also do outreach and networking with our local homeless population and organizations.
Thank you. Melanie?
Hi, I'm Melanie Hall. I'm the program manager at the Cloverdale Senior Multipurpose Center, and just happy to be a part of this group to help our community as needed. Worked a little bit with Reach for Home and providing some meals for the shelterless during this past year. Just see how else we can help.
Thank you. Susie?
I'm Susie Holmes, Finance Director for the City of Cloverdale, and I'm just happy to be part of the group and helping out however I can.
Thank you. Anna?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ana Rangel. I'm the Director of Operations at Reach for Home. I'm happy to be back. I know it's been a while, so happy to see everyone here.
Thank you. Michael Gauss?
Yeah, Michael Gauss. Yeah, thank you. Michael Gauss, Ending Homelessness Manager with the Community Development Commission, County of Sonoma. Happy to be here and help out.
Thank you. And I believe it's Nina?
Hi, I'm Nina Hanchat, and I'm the director of the Cloverdale Chamber of Commerce, and I am here principally to be the liaison between the Cloverdale business community and this organization. Thank you. Thanks everybody for their time and the resources they've devoted to it.
Thank you. We have Lieutenant Duke.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. Tim Duke with Sonoma County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. And we have Lieutenant Parker.
Got to unmute myself. Lieutenant Parker, Cloverdale PD, and glad to be with you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Colleen. And then Irene Camacho-Werby, City Clerk with the City of Cloverdale.
Thank you so much, Irene. I really appreciate you taking that on. Next is going to be the update on the recent court decisions regarding homelessness. Alex?
Chair
Alex,
Lynch,
Thank you, council member. Let me share. Irene, am I able to share my screen?
Yes, yes, you are.
Chair Lands, Vice Mayor Cruz, and members of the committee, Alex is going to provide an update on some of the recent court decisions that are affecting management of homelessness, including an injunction that was filed against the city of Santa Rosa, as well as there was two court injunctions that were involving two northern Sonoma County cities, including Larkspur and Marin County, and Santa Cruz County, that affects how cities are addressing encampments within their communities. So he's going to give us kind of a legal background and update on some of the recent developments around homelessness. So with that said, Alex, please proceed.
Thank you, David. And we'll go ahead and start with just a little background on, general laws regarding, handling homelessness issues and criminal enforcement and, clearing encampments that, more traditionally thought of as, code enforcement type conduct. This, is pretty high level overview. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty of all of these cases, but I think it's helpful just as background. I'm sure many of you are aware of these things, but some of you may not be. So it's helpful to make sure everyone has the same basic background and understanding. So cities have municipal codes, and the municipal codes establish lots of rules and regulations. And cities have the authority to issue misdemeanor citations or infractions for violations of the municipal code. We do that in Cloverdale, not often, but from time to time. And one thing that municipal codes often prohibit is, sleeping, sitting, or lying in a public place, or camping on private property in public view. And unhoused individuals often engage in one or both of those types of activities. And so some cities in the past have used as a tool to, dealing with homelessness, issuing citations for that kind of conduct and for violating those ordinances. And that hasn't been a tool that's been used in Cloverdale, but some areas have used it. Recently, about 2 years ago, there was a federal case that the Ninth Circuit essentially said that enforcing those types of ordinances on individuals experience homelessness violated the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution. And what the Eighth Amendment says is that cruel and unusual punishments are not allowed. And the reason these types of ordinances, the court explained, violate that Eighth Amendment rule is that sitting, lying, sleeping, that's, an involuntary activity. Every human engages in that. Every human needs to engage in that. And engaging in that sort of conduct is, it's impossible to separate that behavior from the unhoused person's, status as an unhoused person. And because the city, the county can't criminalize simply the state of being a homeless individual, of being an individual experiencing homelessness, a state, a city, the county can also not criminalize conduct that is an unavoidable consequence of being unhoused, such as sitting, lying, or sleeping on the street. So if you are an unhoused individual, you need to sleep someplace. There's no, way of getting around that. And so punishing someone for merely engaging in an activity that you have to do as a human, the court said was cruel and unusual and violated the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution. So the scope of the ruling is both very broad, but also quite narrow in some ways. So this does not apply to unhoused individuals who can pay for shelter or who have access to a free shelter. And it does not necessarily prohibit criminalizing this type of behavior at certain times or in certain places. So a blanket across the board prohibition, would probably be unconstitutional, but a prohibition on, camping or sleeping near a school or near a creek, that may be, permitted. And also it doesn't prohibit criminal enforcement for other types of conduct. So, public intoxication, illegal fires that are started in certain places, public urination, those sorts of things may still be subject to criminal enforcement because those types of conduct can be separated from, or at least in many cases can be separated from the mere status of being an unhoused individual. And another thing just to note is that this law, this doesn't apply to someone, this is about public property, right? This isn't someone who's trespassing on private property. This would not, this sort of limitation in Boise does not apply to that situation. If someone is trespassing, you're not, the criminal enforcement is not about them being unhoused, it's about the action of the trespassing. And sorry to jump back. So just to note on the top, the ruling does not apply to individuals who have access to shelter for free. What the practical impact of that is, if a community has shelter beds available and those shelter beds are offered to an individual who is unhoused and they refuse those, they refuse to go to that shelter, it's in that situation, it may be possible to provide, to still do criminal enforcement against that individual, still issue a citation for camping or that sort of thing, because that person has been provided access to a shelter for free, but has not been willing to avail themselves of that situation. Now, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but that's sort of the basic rule. There's some question of, how, for example, how close does a shelter have to be? If you're sent to a shelter way in southern, if there's room of a shelter way in the southern part of the county, miles and miles away, does that count as there being an available shelter bed? If you're a family and the shelter is women's only or women and kids only, and you want to stay together as a family, like there are certainly gray areas in there that are haven't necessarily been discussed or worked out by the courts in depth, but that is sort of the general rule, that if there's shelter beds available, then the criminal enforcement at least is theoretically possible. The other major issue with our topic that comes up when discussing unhoused people is encampments that sometimes can be just sort of seen as an inconvenience or a nuisance by a community, but in other situations can become serious health or safety concerns as well. And there are rules regarding, courts have established rules regarding or guidelines regarding how and when these encampments can be cleared. And again, these rules apply to encampments more or less on public property. If someone is trespassing, the process to clear that encampment is much different and much quicker process than if an encampment pops up, in city-owned right-of-way or someplace like that. So individuals have property rights in their belongings, and they're entitled to some level of procedural protections before the government, before the city or the county or the state takes those belongings. And so courts have said a governmental entity can't move and destroy the property of a person experiencing homelessness without some sort of process and without an objectively reasonable belief that the property has been abandoned. And the way you determine that a property has been abandoned is to follow some sort of procedure where a reasonable person would determine, hey, this property has been abandoned at this point. And so there isn't a strict rule. There's no law saying, this is the exact procedures you need to follow, but the procedures in different cities have been challenged, and based on what courts have upheld, there's sort of a general understanding of what procedures are allowed. So in general, the best practice is to provide notice at least 72 hours prior to clearing an encampment that the encampment is going to be removed. That is usually also a good time, to be offering other services and those types of things. But at a minimum, 72 hours notice that, the Public Works Department or whoever is going to clear an encampment at that time. And that gives unhoused individuals an opportunity to begin, gathering their belongings and moving on. When city or other officials come to an encampment, if unhoused individuals are still there, packing up, removing their belongings, the public entity needs to allow them to finish that process. It can't, come in and and bulldozed, for lack of a better word, an encampment that's in the process of being cleaned up. But if the city comes to a location and discovers, everyone's gone, but there's some belongings left behind, the city can clear that encampment, but there are requirements on what they have to do. And the city has to document what items are being collected and has to store those items, and with limitations on what's allowed to be thrown away. So something that's clearly trash can be thrown away, food wrappers, things like that. Of course, like everything, there's a gray area on what's, clearly trash is an abandoned, bike that's missing tires. Is that clearly trash? There are some gray areas. Of course, stuff that would be unsafe to store, or food items, personal hygiene items, those can generally also be thrown away. And notice needs to be provided to the individuals of where they can retrieve their belongings from. So in general, that would be included in the 72 hours notice, but also posted after the encampment is cleared. And the jurisdiction, say the county, whoever is doing the encampment, needs to maintain those belongings for, we say at least 14 days. Many area, cities do much longer than that, but sort of at least 14 days to give the unhoused individuals an opportunity to come pick it up. And, based on the documentation, staff or whoever will be able to find, okay, these belong to you, or this is, where your things are. There are exceptions to these requirements, when there are immediate threats to public health or safety, it may be reasonable to shorten, the 72 hours notice, or take other more immediate steps. Or if, there's evidence of a crime committed, there may be, some flexibility in these rules, but this is a general framework for understanding that the encampment clearing process. I'm sure many on the call are already sort of aware of this general framework, but I think often the public, members of the public, don't understand the legal requirements that have to be go through. So clearing an encampment is not illegal, but obviously it requires jurisdiction to follow a pretty detailed and can be burdensome process, depending on resources. It takes a lot of space to store the belongings from an encampment, and to have someone always, sort of on duty wherever that's stored, so that someone can come and pick up their stuff if they choose to. And the one issue I just want to highlight is railroad property. In most cases is private property, and you see that is where a lot of encampments brought up, and it presents unique challenges because it's not property owned by the city. It's also not property it's private property, but railroads have a lot of unique authority and powers under federal law. So the city can't abate nuisances on railroad property as easily as they might be able to otherwise. So that's just the sort of issue to highlight, because so often that is the location where homeless encampments pop up, and it just requires some coordination with the railroad. And sometimes that's easy, sometimes it's hard, and depending on whose railroad tracks it is, you find the whole range of how cooperative and a railroad wants to be. So the city of Santa Rosa a lawsuit was filed against the city of Santa Rosa back in 2019 that has resulted in this negotiated injunction. And that basically just means a court didn't directly rule on this issue, but the parties basically reached a settlement, for lack of a better word, that governs how enforcement will occur, how both criminal enforcement and clearing of encampments will occur in the city of Santa Rosa. It also applies to Sonoma County, but only to basically only to county lands within the city of Santa Rosa. So not other parts of the county outside the city's boundaries. This lawsuit was, the decision was reached after Boise, the case we talked about earlier. And so it certainly shaped a lot by that decision. And it lays out in great detail. It's multiple pages, but just the highlights are that the city can only take an enforcement action after going through specific procedures. And enforcement action could be criminal enforcement. It could be, clearing an encampment. It could be some other types of things. But there's a process laid out in the injunction requiring the agency to notify the unhoused individuals of their rights under the law and under the injunction, to provide an opportunity for an assessment of the unhoused individual by outreach staff to see what resources they may qualify for, what resources they need, an opportunity to be placed in adequate shelter. And it defines what shelter means. So I believe, I may be misremembering this off the top of my head, but like it defines adequate shelter to mean a bed has to be available for 30 days in a row. So it provides some guidance on what that means. And then also has to provide a reasonable opportunity for the unhoused person to individual and to relocate in lieu of facing this enforcement action. And it lists a whole lot of exceptions of these rules. So it doesn't apply to school property. It doesn't apply to property that's locked or fenced or has no trespassing signs, or that might require a permit or reservation to use. And it doesn't prohibit enforcement of very specific laws regulating certain conduct. And the injunction lays out exactly what those laws are. So it cites the specific, Santa Rosa Municipal Code section about, obstructing public property. So you may not be able to, you can't set up a encampment, right in the middle of a sidewalk that's going to block people from using the sidewalk. You can't consume public alcohol publicly. That's still something that could be prohibited and can face enforcement. There are also enforcement of fish and game statutes is allowed, and there are fish and game statutes regarding camping near creeks and rivers. So that sort of enforcement is still allowed. And this injunction is not binding on Cloverdale. It's just binding on the city of Santa Rosa and partially on the county, but it's influential, right? Santa Rosa is the big city in the county, and this is a litigation from within the county. So it's reasonable to assume that if Cloverdale was ever sued or something similar happened in Cloverdale, we'd probably reach a similar result of this sort of litigation, this sort of injunction that came about here. And it helps sort of illuminate what the requirements of Boise are. It gives some teeth, for lack of a better word, for what does shelter mean? What are these other things? But I think it's also reasonable to say that most people would interpret this injunction as a little bit more than what Boise would normally require, or what other Ninth Circuit decisions would normally require. This injunction was temporary. It's set to expire, I believe, in June of this year. And there are, negotiations going on between the parties about, whether it continues, whether this becomes permanent, whether there's some other, path that's proposed. And just the injunction also deals with clearing encampments. It requires reasonable time and reasonable notice to be given in a reasonable time and in a reasonable manner to people to give them time to collect and move their items. And it requires items to be stored for 90 days. So I mentioned earlier that 14 days was sort of seen as the minimum, and that's been approved, in some areas, but this injunction requires 90 days. So that's a long time to, store belongings. It requires a lot of space and a, very good inventory system for that. And of course, it also details what sorts of items can be immediately discarded. So it provides some teeth and some meat to what I mentioned earlier is clearly trash. It defines that much more specifically. And then in the last, month or 2 months, there have been 2 cases, one in Sausalito and one in Santa Cruz that resulted in injunctions preventing cities from taking certain actions. And the action the cities were proposing to take in these cases was nothing criminal. It was, just clearing encampments and actually relocating those encampments to a different area. So in the case of Sausalito, the city proposed to relocate an encampment from one park to another park. And that was one part of the city's plan. And the other part of the city's plan was to prohibit daytime camping. And so I mentioned earlier that, the Ninth Circuit had said it's probably allowable for cities to enact restrictions on camping in certain places and at certain times. And so Sausalito had proposed to prohibit daytime camping, which means, every morning the encampment needs to be packed up. And in this case, the city had provided a certain number of lockers for people to store their belongings in during the day. Advocates filed a lawsuit against the city and the court issued a temporary injunction blocking the plan. And what the court ruled is that, unhoused individuals, like everyone else, have substantive due process rights, and those rights are violated when a state action by a governmental entity affirmatively places a plaintiff in more danger. So places them in more danger than they would have been absent the action by the government. And the court ruled, so the court looked at both of the things the city was planning on doing. The first thing was a ban on day camping. And the court said, this would be uniquely dangerous because of dangers related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The court discussed sort of at length CDC recommendations, which are that encampments should not be dispersed and people should be allowed to remain where they are. That requiring these encampments to get packed up every day would require, a lot of, it would make it difficult to comply with social distancing requirements. If homeless individuals, at this time, it might not be safe to drink out of, public drinking fountains. That means homeless, unhoused individuals need to maintain the water source. They have to carry that around. That could be a burden. So that was what they said as to the first issue. And then they also said movement to a new park would endanger individuals based on the specific environmental conditions at the new park. And the plaintiffs made certain allegations and presented certain evidence about the new dock, the new park that was suggested. It was near a boat dock. There was some boat maintenance going on there, dust and other sort of potential industrial hazards there. And the city didn't really present a whole lot of counter evidence to counter those arguments presented by the plaintiffs. And so the court ultimately issued a temporary injunction. And when issuing the temporary injunction, the court noted that it was temporary. At some point in the future, there would be a more, a question of whether this injunction should exist permanently, but at least for the purpose of a temporary injunction, the safety risks and the balance of the hardships, greatly favored prohibiting the city from doing this at this point in time. But the court noted, as time passes, that might change. That balancing test might change. So for example, as COVID-19 recedes, the calculation of those safety risks, they may not be as strong anymore. And so it may be that the city can move forward with the ban on day camping, even if it can't do that now. And similarly, the court said, city didn't provide much evidence to counter the plaintiff's evidence that the change of park was a safety risk. You know, at a future time, you can present more evidence of why there is no safety risk in moving these, enforcing this relocation of the encampment. So there was a very similar case to this. Case was from Sausalito. There was a very similar case to this in Santa Cruz. It's unclear a little bit if this is going to be, create some new law about how encampments can be cleared, or if this is really just a unique situation based on COVID and things like that, and it's sort of a once in a pandemic, but in 2 or 3 years it won't be relevant. So that's a little clear at that time. At this time, it'll sort of be sorted out in the coming years as other jurisdictions work on this a little bit more. So that was a lot of information that I sort of presented to you quite quickly and without stopping for any questions. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to go over anything again or answer any other questions you may have. Yeah, yes, council member.
Yeah, this is Marta Cruz, and I am wondering if there's any particular area that addresses jurisdiction issues, such as city limits and county, because that's a big issue for all of us here in Sonoma County, especially in Cloverdale.
Right. There are no direct cases that address that directly. I mean, obviously, jurisdictional boundaries are arbitrary is not the right word, but an enforcement action in one area can just lead people to crossing a border someplace else. And there so far have been no cases directly dealing with that. I think there's a lot of grumbling between neighboring cities sometimes, but no at least major court decisions where that's been an issue that's been addressed, where a court has said you can't do that, it's pushing people to a different city or things like that. But it's certainly a very practical issue because unhoused people need places to sleep and to live, and unless they have permanent housing, displacing an encampment one place can often just lead to relocation in other locations.
Alex, I have kind of a follow-up question to Vice Mayor Cruz's comment, and I understand that the jurisdictional issue is somewhat challenging. We're going to touch on it later in the agenda that there's a similar effort going on in northern Sonoma County to develop a plan for addressing homelessness for northern Sonoma County. And Supervisor Gore has recommended that the city attorney's offices collaborate on an encampment policy. And I realize it may be premature, but is there anything you can share with this group, either a status or update, and foresee, what might be some of the challenges to trying to develop an encampment policy that comports with our respective, municipal codes and requirements?
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Dave. So I guess as a background, the county had started discussions about a encampment policy that there had been some hope that perhaps it could be implemented countywide, because that creates a little more uniformity across the county. And if everyone has the same rules, it makes things more certain. It's less arbitrary. It puts every one on the same footing, and makes addressing this issue a little easier, because it's certainly a well, not easier. It's never easy, but it's a regional issue, and so one regional policy makes things easier. There were some hesitations, I think, about what the county's initial plan might be, and city attorneys, they did all meet and discuss some ideas in various policies. I think a big concern that the city attorneys have is these two recent cases from Santa Cruz and Sausalito. Sort of one of them, they're very similar in what they did, but one of the decisions really suggested, hey, this is temporary. This is really about COVID-19 and sort of unique circumstances about that. Whereas the case from Santa Cruz, the language in that much more suggested that the court would have ruled the same way, even absent COVID-19 or in the future. And so it creates just some limitations on what cities might be able to do. A camping ordinance, an overnight camping ordinance that only prohibits daytime camping. Well, what do unhoused people do with their stuff during the day if they have to clear up the encampment every day? And that's a question that there was. Would that be considered a law that just punishes people because of the act of being homeless? So, as I'm sure everyone on the task force knows, addressing homelessness issues, there's no easy solution, or the solution would have been, found by now. There's different things that work a little bit, but even if they work at addressing this thing, they may have some unintended consequences someplace else. But I will say, I do work for cities in other jurisdictions as well, and Sonoma County is much better about addressing this as a regional problem. It's hard, but it's still just even desiring to address it as a regional problem, leads to greater collaboration and those types of things.
Any other group members with questions? Any other hands, Irene? I don't see any on my screen, so.
Other hands from the panel.
Thank you, Irene. Anyone from the participants? Other attendees?
Are there any listeners that wish to raise their hand and ask a question of Mr. Mogg?
Anyone at all on the attendees list? Okay.
I don't know.
Seeing none. Alex, if you don't mind, with the 90 days in Santa Rosa with the injunction, I know that's been in place since we started this committee, and the 14 days with Martin versus Boise, what is an average that cities are kind of trying to comply with right now?
I don't know if there is an average. I think 14 days is certainly on the lower end. I think it's much higher than that for most cities, just because that's sort of the bare minimum. What courts have said, or what the Ninth Circuit has said, is sort of reasonable amounts of time. And so I think most have gone, 30 days or plus. But many, there are certainly cities who don't even provide 14 days, who just, discard the stuff right away if it's left behind. So there is a whole range of things. I would say 30 plus is more common, but, as I've seen as low as 14, and many have 90. I think Oakland and Berkeley have around that amount as well.
And just a little more clarification. Let's say Cloverdale PD arrests somebody in the middle of town for whatever penal code violation you want to make up, and they have a camp that is outside the city limits on the riverbed. Cloverdale PD is not responsible for going out there and collecting all their belongings, because it is technically, they weren't arrested at their home or their area. Is that correct?
Yes, in general, that would be correct.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that. I knew that. I just, for purposes of, clarifying a lot of the stuff that, we have to store everything for everyone. It's not always that way. And the railroad property being private property, does that include the distance from the railroad tracks? Because like a railroad property owns, I believe it's like 150 feet or something like that on each side of the railroad. Would that include that property as well?
It would include any property the railroad owns. And in some areas it's as wide as 150 feet, some places it's wider, some places it's narrower, but it would include, any of that area. And then, I mean, for one thing, anytime you're clearing something on the railroad, you need to coordinate with the railroad just for safety too, of the, the people who are doing the encampment clearing or going out there. But it really depends on how cooperative a railroad, wants to be in. And in some jurisdictions, you need to get a congressperson involved almost, contact Union Pacific or whoever to get their cooperation in it. But some railroads are a little more cooperative, or their regional representative is a little more cooperative. So
thank you. Just because all these affect us with so many different borders and ideas around. Vice Mayor Cruz, see you with your hand up.
Yes, no, what Councilmember Lance is inquiring is very concerning to all of us, because many times we don't necessarily know what is the area around the railroads and so on. But my question is in terms of liability. If any of our city employees gets hurt clearing any of these things, or if they get attacked by anybody or anything happens, who is liable? Is it the railroad company? Is it the county? How does that go?
Well, it would be the same as a city employee being hurt anytime working on the job. They would get workers, if they're injured on the job, they'd be eligible for workers' compensation, and they would go through the workers' compensation process. But certainly a reason that coordination with the railroad is necessary is to minimize those, God forbid you have a train come by unexpectedly, and people have to scurry out of the way because of that, and when you're clearing a big encampment, you need, trucks or dumpsters out there as well. So you really, for everyone's safety, there needs to be, in almost all cases that involve a railroad, coordination with the railroad, or it's just too big of a risk to, go plop a dumpster right next to a big, train tracks.
Thank you, Alex. I really appreciate that.
Not too much concern here with a working train, but
right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alex. I appreciate the overview of Martin versus Boise and the injunction, and I think it was very informative for all of us.
Thank you.
Moving on, update on Northern Sonoma County Homelessness Task Force.
Chair Lance, I'm happy to provide an update on the Northern Sonoma County Homelessness Task Force. This task force was established by Supervisor Gore in the 4th District. It's a task force that encompasses really Northern Sonoma County and includes the unincorporated area of Sonoma County, as well as the 3 incorporated cities from south to north: Windsor, the city of Healdsburg, and the city of Cloverdale. There's been a series of meetings to develop a draft strategic plan, looking at a kind of a regional approach that looks at the homeless population within the 4 areas, 3 incorporated cities and an unincorporated area. Our process has been, tracking fairly closely with the Northern Sonoma County regional planning effort. Much like we did, the planning effort took a pause back in February and recently restarted this year again with a similar kickoff meeting in February, and then a follow-up meeting in April. And the intent, I think, is to have at least 2 more meetings before a draft of a strategic plan is prepared. Thus far, the Northern Sonoma County Homeless Task Force has developed a draft plan. It recognizes that there are what are called 5 solutions to ending homelessness. Those are also addressed in our draft plan. Those include a coordinated approach. It's a approach that is a community-wide, and looks at delivering services and addressing database decisions to how to allocate resources to the homeless population and address the impacts. Also, one second solution is looking at rapid rehousing to address how do you provide housing for the homelessness, and then looking at different solutions there, including like short-term rental assistance and services. Some of the other solutions include permanent supportive housing, increasing income and income supports for low-income communities as ways to kind of help ameliorate people becoming homelessness. And then last but not least, a crisis response system. So those, in terms of the counties or the Northern Sonoma County plan, those are kind of the 5 major solutions that have been developed. Flowing from that, there are currently 6 strategies in the draft plan for ending homelessness. Each one of those 6 strategies has a corresponding set of what are referred to as in the northern regional plan tactics, and that kind of falls similarly to our planning effort, where we have specific strategies. The 6 major strategies include engaging community members and residents, businesses as partners in addressing the homeless crisis. I think that's pretty consistent with our draft plan. Conducting street outreach and street medicine. Continuing to, one of the kind of national tools that has been implemented by HUD, Housing and Urban Development for Homelessness, is the coordinated entry system. And the Northern Sonoma County plan seeks to continue to assist with implementation of that plan for people who are experiencing homelessness, to identify them, get them into the system, and be able to get resources to the folks that are in need of services. In addition, the plan includes providing homeless prevention services and diversion services, and that's to help households preserve their current housing situation, mitigate it before it becomes an issue. So kind of rental assistance, looking at alternative arrangements, for example. Last but not least is to provide immediate low barrier access to emergency shelter and interim housing. I think the emergency shelter piece is in part driven by some of these court decisions where, in order to clean up these encampments and get folks out of the public right of way, looking at opportunities to provide that shelter, so you have a legally enforceable mechanism to address homelessness, where there is other options available. And then finally, to connect people experiencing homelessness with, again, permanent supportive housing programs or other options. So that's kind of an overview of the planning effort. Wanted to bring this forward because I think it's an opportunity. Many of the same organizations that are involved in providing services, whether they be public safety, it's the sheriff's office or our police department, whether it be services. So it's to our business communities, it's our local chamber of commerces, to our housing partners and organizations that are providing services like Catholic Charities or Reach for Home. And then in addition to that, there's also corresponding metrics for tracking, the number of homeless in our community and how well we're performing on these measures in terms of getting folks housing, or how long it takes to how many contacts it takes before you can get a homeless individual off the street or provide services. And then one of the more maybe critical aspects is identifying funding needs that are needed by our community. And again, because the issue of homelessness is really, it doesn't stop at the city boundary. As we know, there's our opportunity for us as we develop our own city-specific or city-centric policy to look at opportunities that are being developed for the Northern Sonoma County region, where we can continue to build opportunities for collaboration and also funding towards the same initiatives, assuming we identify the same strategies and tactics to try to address homelessness in Sonoma County, Northern Sonoma County, and then in our own city, and work with our partners. So wanted to share that effort because I feel like it's important that we also track and monitor where that's going, and again to seek those opportunities for collaboration. So Chair Lenz, that kind of concludes the overview of the plan. I did put a copy of the most recent draft strategic plan that has been developed by Supervisor Gore. They have the benefit of hiring a facilitator and consultant, BJ Bischoff. She's a great facilitator and leader to help draft the plan. By working with members of all three communities and then the unincorporated area. And I think Lieutenant Duke, I think, is also involved in that effort, as well as Reach for Home and some of the other partners that are participants on our community advisory group.
Great.
David,
Thank you,
this is
David.
Michael. Or
Go ahead, Michael.
I'm not sure if it's in the report of the county, but one of the matrix I don't think that is tracked is the nonprofits that are providing rental, utility, and lease donations, so individuals and families can stay in their home and not become unsheltered. That's one of the impacts that we've had in our community in doing that in the last 4 years.
Michael, that's a great point. And I think there's an opportunity within our draft framework to list those organizations that provide services and to identify them and what services they provide. One, because it could be something we want to have available, and who the contacts are, what kind of services are available, so that the community is aware and can direct folks that maybe are experiencing challenges to those services, but also so we know who those organizations are, and can help track what level of services they're providing, and and to whom, so we have real hands-on account of what's happening in our community and what the needs are. So I've made a note here, and I'll certainly look where we can identify that either in our plan or and can reflect that in a comment to the facilitator that's leading up the regional plan.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Cruz.
Margaret, go ahead and then I'll go.
Okay, I was just going to say that one of the action items that came out of the last 4th District meeting that David was just talking about was a resource guide for outreach. So resource guide for those people who are currently unsheltered. And it's something that I've started working on. I'm going to need help from the different cities to make sure that I'm not missing resources, but the intent is to have it to hand out to people so they can get resources. But Michael, to your point, I think it would be great to also have resources for people who are currently housed. It's also something that we're looking at adding to our website. We already have some resources on our website, but looking to add a tab, and perhaps we can break that down by city as well to help support the efforts. I like that metric, Michael, and I agree with David. We should take that back to the meeting and maybe we can add it in.
Thank you.
Margaret. Oh, Michael, did you want to respond to that?
No, ma'am. I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay. You know, it is important that this information is handed out to people, but given the circumstances of many of the unsheltered people, in terms of the mental state and so on, and the inability to keep their belongings with themselves and losing a lot of stuff a lot, I think it would be wise to perhaps have some sort of place close by to where unsheltered are to post this information. Because if they don't have access to the internet, or if they just threw away a paper that was given to them or something, it's always there and they can go back to that area to see the information. And it might be a bulletin board at a laundromat or at a church, a place where they go shopping, or even by the bathrooms, the mobile ones, mobile units, and also with the showers for the unsheltered too. So that's another dimension that we need to include. Is just not preparing the materials, but having it readily available to people. Then the next point, to continue to support people who are at the verge of becoming homeless, it impacts us as policymakers in the city of Cloverdale and elsewhere, because we have many people in the community who have very substandard facilities for renters. And many people don't talk, because if the landlord is fine, or if somebody goes to enforce, you know, these are the standards that you have to meet, then the person might just say, okay, I'm just going to close down and you have nowhere to live. But it is very concerning to us. And the mayor and I were talking about this some time ago. What is the happy medium? Where do we go in terms of policy to make sure that whomever provides a room or a house or a trailer is one that complies with the basics, having at least a shower or a toilet or water or access to electricity. And we are seeing a lot of that here in our town. And of course, it will be very hard to enforce, because we cannot access people's properties unless there is a complaint. But it is an issue that is putting a lot of people at the verge of becoming homeless. So that is something that at some point we as a council need to discuss, and we need input from the community, and perhaps even assistance from the community, making sure that somehow they talk to the individuals who are renting space and say, hey, you know, I know that you're doing this and we don't want to report it, but make sure that for the safety, for the public health condition of the whole town and the individuals in the neighborhoods, you know, that there's a level of compliance with that. But it is a catch-22 kind of situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So true. Any other comments from the group members? Seeing none, Irene, I don't see any. Christine, no, that's an old hand. I don't see any hands with the attendees. Do you? Any attendees? Raise your hand if you have any questions or comments regarding this item?
Looks like no
Seeing
hand.
none. Okay, well, thank you, David, and thank you all for being involved in that one. We'll move on to the next, which is an update from Police Chief Ferguson on the police response to homelessness.
Thank you, Chair. I think the best way to handle this is really kind of go over the problems that we've faced and the challenges with enforcing those problems. And then how did we respond? And then lastly, what were the outcomes from our response? So we'll start with the complaints regarding homeless in the plaza and the business district. Generally, those complaints were surrounding subjects who were loitering, lying, sleeping, smoking, drinking, trespassing at the businesses, and sometimes even theft. The challenges with this situation is the individuals here who are homeless are the ones who choose to be in this position. They don't necessarily, well, they don't want help. They've been given help and they've walked away from those opportunities. So this is one of the biggest challenges we have. And you just heard from Alex regarding the Supreme Court decision in Martin versus Boise that makes it very difficult for us to enforce exactly what they're doing in the plaza, and as well as any anti-camping ordinance that would prohibit them from literally sleeping on the benches there. One of the issues, of course, was the trespassing and thefts from businesses. Those are misdemeanor crimes not committed in our presence. So there was a little bit of a challenge with getting the owners to understand and cooperate with how that process works. So our response to that was to, first of all, increase foot patrols in the plaza in the business district for every shift. And we started issuing cites and officers enforced Muni Code violations when subjects were smoking and drinking in the plaza. And when any violations occurred, and we also did a lot of opportunities, it was a slippery slope, mind you, but there were a lot of opportunities where we had them move along. Specifically for the businesses, we provided business watch meetings to address the trespassing and theft related crimes. And we also educated the business owners on how that process works from a police standpoint. So that was very positive. So what were the outcomes of that? Just in this last year alone, our foot patrol activities, we did 333 just in the plaza area. 260 of those, we actually contacted individuals and either spoke with them, warned them, or moved them along when we could. 29 of those resulted in citations and or arrests or cases taken. 7 different times we placed 5150 holds on individuals, was hoping to get them help when it was needed. I'm going to address this particular area in a little bit because I think it's really important to some of our challenges. And then there were 38 other incidents that were just miscellaneous in the plaza itself. So we really stepped up the enforcement aspect of that. So the second challenge we really faced were the encampments. We discussed this earlier about River Park and the railroad property and their concerns for significant trash scattered around everywhere, the warming fires. So our challenges to that, of course, were it's state property and in the River Park, a lot of it's county property, most of it. The problem with the NCRA, the railroad, is there was no trespass notices on file granting police the authority to issue trespass notices. There's specific language that has to be included in these letters. And more importantly, these letters must be updated every year. And so we were lacking that. And so that was a requirement we were going to need in order for us to enforce that on behalf of the railroad property because it is deemed private. So it has a different threshold, as Alex spoke of. And one of the challenges was NCRA had an expectation that we would go out and clean it up, enforce, make all the arrests simply based on a letter granting us that authority. The problem we had with that in 2018, the city used its resources for 2 days to do a prior cleanup of an encampment at the cost of $6,200. To this date, the city has not been reimbursed from NCRA for that cleanup effort, which is a problem. Resources for us to go out on property that does not belong to the city is somewhat of a problem. I understand the regional approach, but it does create an issue when it comes to how much money we spent in using our resources to clean up that property with no reimbursement. So how do we respond to that? I personally corresponded with NCRA reps regarding getting the appropriate letter authorizing us the ability to enforce trespassing. Also requested that they provide a representative to come down and inspect and take a look at the encampment and work on cleanup efforts. And then we also conducted routine patrols on our UTV out at the railroad tracks. We were trying that for a week, going on a weekly basis. And we were able to update the trespass notice. So what were some of our outcomes? We were able to give warnings to individuals that were there. This was prior to the new letter being authorized. They did not vacate, and we were unable to locate those subjects after several follow-up inspections. I was part of some of those follow-ups and were unable to locate anybody twice. And to date, we have not received a response from NCRA on the cleanup efforts or identifying a representative to come inspect the area and check the encampment. And we are still pending that response on how they intend to work with us to do that cleanup. One of the other issues I just want to brush on is we already discussed the property issue. Not only is there an issue of financial effort for our resources on state property, but there's also the threshold for storage of their personal property becomes an issue for us, having to manage that and where are we going to store it. And not to mention what Vice Mayor Cruz brought up, which was an excellent point, the health aspect to this for the individuals cleaning this up. We're still dealing with COVID. And those things are factors out there, as well as being injured. So the third major problem we ran into was the car wash property. We were getting numerous complaints regarding homeless subjects accumulating trash and camping overnight on the property. Of course, the challenge here is we were unable to enforce it due to it being private property and the protections afforded under to the homeless individuals because it's private property. There was no letter on file from the owner authorizing police to enforce, and there was also no trespass signs around the property that would prevent any such person from occupying it. So what was the response to that? The city council really had a lot of hand in this. They assisted with getting a proper trespass notice from the property's owner, granting police authority to arrest and or move subjects for trespassing. Proper signage was also posted around the entrances of the property, and cleanup efforts also were completed on that property. So the outcomes as of today, extra patrol was been conducted by the officers, and we've removed 6 subjects from that property on 6 different calls for service because we had the authority to do so now. Overall, there's been reduced citizen complaints on the property itself. And I think fencing is still an option that's going to be done in the future, but that's pending. Another problem, and I think I kind of briefly touched on this on the cleanup efforts, but COVID in general was a challenge for us because homeless subjects were exempt from the shelter in place order, which meant they were able to kind of move around as they were around the city. So we had to develop, our response to that was developing protocols that protected our officers, but still allowed us to provide that service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year while the pandemic was still going and continues to go. And the only real stats I can say is we handled a lot of calls, many of them homeless related around businesses during this whole COVID, which was a challenge for us, but we continue to do that to this day. So it's still ongoing. Another big challenge for us, repeat offender and revolving doors. On these folks that just chose to be out here, chose to commit crimes, and they don't want the services offered, we were constantly having to deal with this, arresting them, bringing them down, only to have them come back and nearly be back as fast as we got back to the city. It's a significant challenge for us that we weren't getting the kind of convictions or keeping them in there to prevent them from coming back. We also had a lack of support from county, and I'm going to specifically cite mental health services to address some mental health problems that were existing, in particularly one individual, and I am going to address that here. We made a lot of efforts to try to get help with at least 2 individuals that I know of where we tried to get them housing, and one was too disruptive and had to be removed, and the second just chose not to take that option. So those attempts have been made, just not successful by the sake of the own individuals. But I want to kind of circle back to the 5150, the mental health holds that we've placed. The 7 that I addressed to you was based on one individual here in our community. Between January of 2020 and this year so far, this individual we've placed on 7 5150 holds. Not one of them has kept that individual for any length of period of time. And so that the group here understands, a 5150 hold is placed when somebody is deemed to be unsafe to care for themselves or the safety of others, or they're gravely disabled. I don't know how much more you can prove that somebody's a danger to themselves and others than when they go out into the middle of the street and get hit by a car because of their mental health capacity. So 7 times we've placed that individual on holds, and that individual is walking the street today, to the point where we've had to put a restraining order, protect certain individuals. So the struggles with those services are very real. I can tell you that we've had those and that they exist. And I've even made telephone calls to the mental health department with really no avail. So that's been a huge struggle. And the same individual, just from that same time period, January 20 with the current, we have contacted 123 times for a variety of different things, yelling, we've been called to them, or just contacted them in the plaza. So you can understand, and I hope you understand, that given all of our efforts that we try, there are huge breakdowns in a system that really cripple us in our ability when we really need them to step up and help out. So I really wanted to kind of outline those problems, how we identified them, the challenges, and then what our response to those was. Be happy to answer any questions that anybody has at this time.
Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate that. That was a great. Debbie Howell, I see your hand first, please.
Hi, this is Debbie from Alexander Valley. Chief Ferguson, can you put a cost on your resources in dealing with that one individual?
I can't give you that number specifically now, but I can probably do a little research and come up with that. But I will just tell you right now, it's probably going to blow you away when I tell you what it's cost totality to take the individual 7 different times to down south to get them to the appropriate facility. And the number of ultimately arrests that we've had to do that takes the individual down to the jail and the time spent to do that. Because unfortunately, when all the other avenues, including housing and mental health, are failing the person, and I'm not saying the housing's failing, I'm saying the person's choosing to be in this position, our only options then become we start looking at arrests. And we've had numerous. I will tell you that over the course of this police department contacting this person, 46 arrests. So all those efforts are made to no avail. So that it'd be staggering what the price tag for that would be, Debbie, to be honest.
I think it's informative for the city council to see how much our resources are going. I kind of pretty much know who you're talking about.
Right.
I think it would be very useful to have. The other thing is the mental capacity, if this is the person I'm thinking about, is not at a place where she's making choices. She is not mentally there. And you have no resources to deal with that. There is no mental health facilities to put her in. That's one of the problems. So I think it would be very interesting to know what that is costing us as a community, and have that, just a rough estimate. And no, it would not blow my mind. It would not.
I probably should have restated that. It might not blow your mind.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to understand how much the homeless situation is costing us as a community, because it is costing us in more ways than one.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify, and I don't want to make this a targeting the homeless situation. I really want everybody to understand there is a difference between those who really need, those who want the services, and those we definitely want to align with. And we want to do that in any circumstance we can. But we do have a certain population that just flat out does not want to. This is the lifestyle they've chosen, but they hang on to those protections that they're afforded, which make it extremely difficult for us. And I understand the community's concerns. I understand their complaints, but it's very, very difficult to get them to understand just how difficult it is for us to come up with that overnight solution.
But this is a very good topic to continue to hold in the light to everyone, that mental health, lack of mental health in Sonoma County is an ongoing problem that did not just start during the pandemic. It's been for the 20 years that I've been in this business, and it continues to get worse. And without them recognizing that problem and addressing it, it does tie our hands. And it's costing us a lot of money because there aren't any mental health facilities, or they're not treating 5157 times. I mean, someone needs to do something. Someone's falling through the cracks here, people. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's not on you guys. That's not even a homeless issue. That's a mental health issue. This person needs to be in a facility.
It's a reality we face, and I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. I'm not going to shut up about it, not at this meeting, but at the county level. I'm not going to, because it's not changing.
Thank you, Debbie. You hit the topic nail on the head right here, because this is exactly where the problem is. The problem I think that I see all along, it's not about homelessness. Truly, it's not the problem. It's the criminal element or the 5150s and their underlying conditions that are not being addressed by those that are, above our pay grade, that need to help us out, because we know our police departments, our fire departments, our ambulances, they're all involved in this. Our community being, having things stolen from them, people hitting someone with a car, that person's going to be damaged for life mentally, having to think about that and how they injured someone. And we really need to work on the ultimate solutions, which to me are addressing their mental health and their substance abuses before we address, or along with, the housing. It can't just be, a house is not the answer, it's the ultimate answer. But getting their capacity to where they can understand, respect, and want to be in that spot is the ultimate goal overall. Let's see, next, I think it was Nina. I think your hand was next. I apologize for going off there.
Quite all right. On this call, I had turned my video off. I'd gotten somebody knocking at the door and asking me to come look at this mound of garbage that's in the plaza, sort of under the bushes. I don't know how long it's been there, but I mean, it affects, when you talk about the cost, it affects our quality of life and how we deal with each other and how we deal with our community. So I know that that's one of those challenging issues, but our public works people are probably going to be cleaning it up, and I don't know, storing it. Some of it's garbage, it's old food. Needles, I didn't see a needle there. I did see aerosol canisters and things like that. So it affects even people that aren't involved with healthcare, and it affects all of us. So just saying. Thanks.
Thank you, Nina. Colleen, I believe you are next.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So this particular individual is a great example, and I think that if, as a group, we could use her as a case study on what not to do. Because when she got into supportive housing at Community Support Network down in Santa Rosa, she was very stable and monitored and taken care of. And then she decided she was going to leave, and so no one could keep her from leaving. And she came back to Cloverdale, which is when she got hit by the car. And when we contacted her case manager, we said, okay, do you have enough now to get her conserved? Is this enough? I mean, she was literally in the hospital, on death's door. And the case manager said, yes, we believe we have enough now. And they apparently went to a judge and still didn't have enough information to get her conserved, which is why we are spending these resources on someone who really shouldn't be out on the street. And it's unethical as a community for us to allow that to happen, to let her continue to decompensate. And if anything, I believe we should, as a group, advocate for this particular individual and hold them up as an example as to what not to do, and see if we can at least get her taken care of.
Colleen, I just want to add real quick to there, I am going to stand up and defend a little bit that, many efforts in regards to this individual have been made, starting with your discussion about having her in appropriate housing. But also every time we do a 5150 hold, that's an effort to get the individual help. That's the desired course. But, it's not for lack of trying. It's like you said, we need to have those things there, but I just want to make it clear that it's not about a lack of effort or lack of trying.
I
We're
totally
doing
agree.
everything in our power that we can do.
I know that, and that's why I'm saying this, because law enforcement, this isn't a situation that law enforcement can persuade a judge to get somebody conserved. Even Supervisor Gore brought up the Laura's Law and why that would be a good solution for a lot of people, even if it was just for a 6-month period, where we can get somebody where their brain, is a little bit healthier, so they can make some better decisions about their future and get into supportive housing. But when you've got somebody that's so impaired that they cannot make those kinds of decisions for themselves. I applaud law enforcement and everybody else on this call who has tried to help this individual for years. And it just seems to me so obvious what the solution is. And anybody wants to get Community Support Network involved in this discussion is welcome to talk to them, because they share in the frustration because they had her stabilized.
Thank you, Colleen. Yeah, I know when I used to work in my prior career, we used to take people to jail because there was no other options for them. 5150, like Chief said, they'd be out before we'd even log out of the call. But what we used to do that would help is we would go to the judges that would be handling the cases and tell them, this person's 5150, this person's a severe alcoholic, whatever it is, and try to get them housed longer in jail so that they would sober up, so they would get off of their drugs, so they would get back onto their medications. And that's not even an option now. And this is where we need to start, in my opinion, not just the Board of Supervisors, we start mixing in the DA into this conversation, as locally as us, but it needs to be countywide. But I mean, it can start in this conversation in this group that they need to sit there and listen to this, because they're the ones that can help us help these people with the underlying issues. Margaret, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, first of all, I completely agree with, we see all the time people who are 5150'd, or we can't even get them 5150'd, and they should be. I mean, they're dying on a street, and we can't even get them 5150'd. So that, there should be a law or a bill or something, and would love to be a part of advocating in some way, shape, or form for that. But what I was going to also say is one of the things that we're working on that might be helpful, and it's taking a little longer than we thought it would, but there wasn't an official county point in time count this year. And so for the unsheltered population. And so one of the things that our team is doing is we are going out and trying to survey as many people who are out there as possible to find out who are the people who, we've heard a couple times now, people are choosing this. So how many exactly in Cloverdale are in that situation, and how many would take safe parking or tiny home, or how many truly want to be housed? And I think as we can get that data and get more clarity around who wants what, who doesn't want help, it'll help us shape the solutions based on the specific people. So as we continue to collect that data, I can bring it to this group and we can start to kind of take a look at it and see how that kind of goes into the strategic plan. Right now, for example, I know there are 5 unsheltered people that we've surveyed that want housing, and they'll take it right now, but we don't have housing. But now we know, okay, we need at least 5 units right away. These people could be off the streets, and we'll just continue to build on that survey that we're doing so that we can keep making decisions based on kind of what the numbers are.
Great, thank you, Margaret. Any other comments from the group? Seeing none, I'll move on to one of our participants. Let's see, the attendee, Leanne. If we could bring her in, be next.
Hi. Yeah, thank you, Chief Ferguson, for your efforts. I see your officers out all over the city all the time doing your very best. Specific to this, I was going to bring up Laura's Law. I know that was on discussion. I wasn't sure if Sonoma County decided to take that on. That would definitely be a step in the right direction. I've done a lot of research on this topic, specifically to Cloverdale in the last year. And I'll leave out why and that happened, because that experience that led me to that was very traumatizing, and I'm in trauma counseling because of it. Anyway, it's just my prior experience is 7 years working for a privately funded outreach organization in Virginia Beach. In Virginia Beach, its population alone is almost 3 times that of the county of Sonoma. And I was led there by a gentleman I met in a recovery meeting, who was homeless for 44 years and by the grace of God got sober, and he started going out to the camps where his friends were, and started just working miracles, and got a bunch of us kind of involved. We got them out on the streets, sweeping the streets. They came up with their own garden. Anyway, the steps that we made were so visible, not only to the people in the community. In our specific area was the resort down the oceanfront, where a lot of them hung out, a lot of drugs, that type of thing. And once they started cleaning up their own area, man, I'm telling you, they get self-esteem, but anyway, it brought them, some pride. I'm not going to say we got a lot of guys out of the camp. We had a lot of veterans. These communities, they stick together and they get scared. The thought of them being out of their little pods is very traumatizing to them in just itself. So, and he told me straight up, yeah, man, the alcohol and my drug use was the results of, they're out, the people that are out there, it's mental illness, period. But, he made it very clear, it's hard to properly diagnose any, mental health issue until a person is off any mind altering substances. So, they might only have mental health issues because of the drug use, or maybe they have them prior. Maybe the use is because they haven't learned, healthy coping skills. Until everyone is categorized, there's not going to be a way to properly support them. Just from my experience, and I know the individual you're talking about. I also know of a younger gentleman who I speak to every time I see him, and he's heartbreaking. But yeah, the longer they're out there, the more damage that's done, and the harder it is to reach them. Community support is huge. Why are there no members of communities on this tag? Why is there no community liaison that the community can go to? Because you know what? I can tell you right now how many people report to me, and I know to other people in the community about situations going on, because they know that we will do something to help. You guys might not hear about all the situations. This community has been doing a very good job, believe it or not, handling a lot of these situations on our own, and we are completely ignored. We are absolutely, me and another community member mistreated by members of an organization who's representing on your board right now and the county. I mean, it was horrifying. Also, I like to do my community service work completely under the radar, and now I was cast into a huge situation I wanted nothing to do with. But we need to just make this a primary focus. There hasn't been a lot of talk until about the suffering that's going on. Not only by these people on the streets that we all see every day when we go into town or out. I see them on the river when I go out there. I know Casey makes a lot of contact with these guys. Nobody's talking to us. There's lots of people in this community that are willing and able to jump in and be part of the solution, and we're just being sidelined completely, and that's completely unacceptable anymore. I'm not gonna sit by. I mean, this community is taking care of itself. Do we need a coordinated effort? Yes. But do we need a member of the Sonoma County CDC on our tag? No, we don't. There are other funding sources out there. I have researched it. I know from personal experience. The city of Virginia Beach started paying attention to what we were doing so much that they came and learned from us. And 3 years ago, opened a center outreach techniques. So I'm just, we need to make people the focus. These are human beings that are suffering, our citizens, and these homeless individuals. A lot of them are criminals, though. I mean, do we even want to talk about the drug problem going on in Cloverdale? We don't know what the deal is. We know about the guys that get off the bikes at the bus station, are met by the drug dealer and drive around and make deliveries all day. We know about that. I mean, I hate to shed light on ugly stuff, but we also understand that there's a protected drug dealer in town that the DA has used as an informant. I mean, this is the information that this community is getting, and the fact that it's being glazed over and acted like it doesn't exist is not acceptable anymore. You need a community in there, community liaisons for the Spanish speaking members of this community too, so that people can go to one person that knows the resources, that could take that information to the proper authorities, so that we don't keep getting these riled up conversations on our community page. The community needs to know there's someone they can go to. The business community too. I know, Nina, I love the work that you do, but the business community also needs their own liaison that's safe. Someone that's safe, that's one of them that they can go to and really talk about some real problems, because it's not getting done in these meetings. I went to that meeting last year, and let me tell you, it was just a hamster wheel of nothingness. This community needs some very specific help, but it doesn't need the help that Santa Rosa has. It doesn't need the help that any of these other cities have. I've researched, homelessness in rural communities. I know I'm not a funding expert, but maybe we need someone on the CAG representing, just looking at funding opportunities outside of HUD and all the things that keep you very strict on what you can and cannot do, what housing, they can't, housing first, all this stuff. Housing first doesn't work for a large population of the addicted, because if the addiction's just the problem, they don't qualify for, SSDI or whatever. So housing first kicks them out, because they expect them to eventually pay something for supportive housing. So it's a huge effort, but you've got a massively educated community. I know just a little bit, but I mean, believe me, I've done my research. But use the community, for God's sakes. Don't be worried about getting money from the federal government or anywhere else. I mean, we might have to rely on some of that, absolutely, with some of the housing programs. But for God's sakes, let us get involved. That's all I have to say. And Chief, just keep up your efforts. I really appreciate it. And Michael, the work that you do at St. Peter's is amazing. And Colleen, the work that you've done is amazing. Debbie, oh my gosh, I've listened to you talk about this before. Let the community members have a voice that's, filtered, I guess. Find find a coordinated, liaison to talk to the county and Reach for Home and all these other organizations. But they don't need, this community can handle this, believe me. But we need to do it together and stop kind of putting your hand up at us. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Leanne, I appreciate that. We've got a couple more hands from the attendees. I think Angela was next.
Can you hear me?
We got you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So I appreciate this meeting. Chief Ferguson, I think you nailed it spot on. Everything you said was absolutely 100% correct. Everything that I am going to reference is regarding the homeless that choose to be in the position that they're in. Bringing a shelter to Cloverdale and knowing that the beds are going to be refused, knowing that the services that are going to be offered are going to be refused, that's a joke. That's just like the old saying, you build it and they will come. You will open up our city to all the homeless throughout the county because there is a shelter there. And if you know it's going to be refused and they're just going to walk away with a citation because they refuse to sleep in a shelter, at a citation that wastes our police officers' time, knowing that this citation will never, ever be paid for, the bed will never be used. It makes no sense. That is the most ingenious idea. Why would you even think that's brilliant? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. To bring a shelter to the city that it's refused in. We all know that it is. And if that's the case, and you want to bring the shelter here, then you need to ramp up our police department. You need to give Chief Ferguson more officers. And if you can't do that, then let the Sonoma County sheriffs take over and let them deal with the problem. If you're not going to ramp up our police department to be able to do their job because of all the homeless that you're going to invite from bringing a shelter. That's my issue on that one. The cases and injunctions that you were talking about, I believe your name was Alex, those are all big cities. Those mean nothing to me. I understand that Chief Ferguson, his hands are tied with certain things. Sonoma County Sheriff, their hands are tied as well. That's all fine and dandy, but don't try to use all those tactics to scare our community, because those are all big cities that have much bigger problems than we do. Much bigger problems. The homeless that we're dealing with, the majority of them don't want help. The ones that do want help, they're getting it. They're finding a way. They're seeking it. I've even talked to some of those individuals. The woman that you're talking about that Chief Ferguson constantly has to deal with, I'm sure that the numbers he's going to throw out will probably be close to an officer's salary. Yeah, I'm exaggerating. No, probably not. The amount of times he has to deal with it. Yes, I personally called. I personally reported her to the county and the state. I personally tried to get her conserved. I had about 15 to 20 other community members who did the same thing, and it failed. They told us that they were working on it. They told Colleen at Wallace House that they were going to do everything they can to get her conserved. It didn't work. It didn't work. Storage. You talked about storage. What's the difference with the city cleaning up all the crap that's left behind opposed to Clean River? Why does the city have to clean that up? Why can't a phone call or email be sent out to Clean River Alliance and have them pick up the garbage, have them dispose of the garbage? Why does it have to be on our dime? Clean River Alliance gets all kinds of money from all kinds of different resources. Why does City of Cloverdale have to pay that? Not only that, does our officers do our officers and our city workers, are they hazmat trained? I mean, you're talking about severely contaminated things. Hold on, I have these. I'm here to pick up a check from your dad, but I'm on the phone. I'm not a stranger, honey. I'll be right there.
He's not here yet.
Okay, it's okay, honey. I'm on the phone. You're talking about personal belongings that you have to sort through to figure out what's contaminated. It's all contaminated. You're talking about urine, feces, blood from shooting up, blood from just bleeding from an injury. It's contaminated. You show me what in an encampment is not contaminated that our police officers and our city workers that are not hazmat trained have to touch and dispose of. That's ridiculous, ridiculous. And Michael Gauss, the census tract data that I asked for in 2020 still hasn't been provided. When that falsified count happened, when I filed my complaint at the state and county level and at our city level on Reach for Home, that data has never been provided. Margaret, you said that you guys wanted to provide housing. What are the rules? What are the regulations? Is it a free-for-all? You just want to buy up all these houses in Cloverdale and drive down our property values and increase our crime? Who's going to babysit them? Let me guess, our police department? You say you want to conduct a count and figure out who needs it. Personally, what I witnessed in 2020 pre-pandemic, Reach for Home should not do the count in Cloverdale. Reach for Home falsified the count in Cloverdale. They went against what the county regulations and the state regulations were when they conducted the count. It was falsified. So Reach for Home shouldn't do it. Cloverdale should be able to take care of their own. Cloverdale has Alexander Valley Health, which is amazing. They have an amazing counselor, Blake, there. They have the Michael and Randy at the church. They have Colleen at Wallace House. They have all of the resources. Cloverdale can take care of their own. We're dealing with people that are refusing to get help, refusing to get help. I know that's not what you wanted to hear. Then you want to talk about where we're going to have to store everything. So the only space we have is what? The police station garage, which I'm sure the police department's using. Where else are you going to store all this contaminated garbage? Where else are you going to use for overnight shelter that's going to be refused? Throw a cot in the garage, call it a day? You know damn well they're going to refuse it. They're not going to want to do it at all. They're not going to stay there. And then we're going to be stuck with 90 days of contaminated garbage that we shouldn't even have to be picking up to begin with. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
And I know that Margaret and all of you will have your opportunity to speak later on different things that were said by the comments. And I know that you are new to Reach for Home for us. And so I will afford you that opportunity as soon as we finish up with these comments. Let's see, next is Renee, please.
Yes, good afternoon. I've been on many of the previous meetings, and Angela and Leanne actually covered a lot of probably what I would have said. But I do want to remind everybody that this is supposed to be a community advisory group. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing a lot of the community members being informed about the meeting. I found out about this meeting last Thursday. It got posted by someone from nextdoor.com. And it was a person that was a community member, but the email notification didn't happen. I checked the website today, it's still not listed. And so I'm concerned. I can't see who's on the call, but I don't think that you have a whole lot of community members because the meeting is planned during the middle of the day when most of us are working. And so those of us that are attending have taken time off work at the last minute unplanned to attend the meeting. So I'm hoping that we can take it seriously to get the community involved to have community solutions.
Thank you, Renee. That's absolutely a good point. And I'll make sure that on our next meeting that we make sure it gets out to the public a lot different ways so that everyone gets it, whether it's social media, email, website, whatever we can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands. Group, any other comments from the group that would like to make right now regarding anything? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Recap and overview of the draft.
Mr. Chair, please.
Yes, Vice Mayor, please.
David, could you clarify the issue of bringing a shelter to Cloverdale? Because I don't see that anywhere in the plan, and I don't remember in any of these county meetings addressing that particular issue as a current or ongoing situation.
Yeah, that's a great question, Vice Mayor. And you know, the issue of shelter has multiple components to it. One is, you know, just in terms of providing or having a space for things like rapid rehousing. So if you do encounter a member of the community that has maybe lost their housing, is there a shelter bed available, or you know, permanent supportive housing, or some type of interim or temporary housing to address that need? I don't want to forget, for example, that especially in the Northern Sonoma County Regional Plan, that one of the affected populations is folks experiencing abuse. Often this is women with children, and sometimes there is a need for those folks to have access to temporary housing to help bridge the gap between that abuse and, you know, finding something more permanent. And then that's been discussed about. That's one of the populations that's been addressed or discussed in the context of homelessness. The other issue is to address the impacts of, you know, the case law is, again, giving us a more authority if there is an available shelter. And again, one of the outstanding questions is, you know, to where does it have to be located? And, you know, I think that's part of this larger discussion on a regional approach is, could, for instance, there be a shelter within northern Sonoma County that we could then utilize to address those folks that are homeless, and they're in a situation where then that's available, and you can enforce, some of the encampment provisions. So that's kind of the context in which shelters are discussed. Ultimately, I mean, that's why we're here, is to talk about what's our strategy as a community and where do shelters fit into that strategy. And then what kind of shelters? There's this really, it's, shelters are kind of, there's multiple aspects to it. It's not as simply a shelter encampment like Los Villicos necessarily. It ranges from that on one end to, it can be a bedroom where folks have a place to go in an emergency. So, again, discussing that range of what are the different populations that you want to address, that's really part of this planning process. And I think, that'll be ties into the next kind of overview of our plan. And Chair, if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask Irene if she could navigate, and I think it would be beneficial for members of our community who have a question. We do have the draft framework on our website. Irene, if you can maybe open our main page, and I'll use this as a tool to just briefly recap, what are the 7 strategic plan draft goals, and where shelters might fit into that. So if you go to the home page, and then so on the home page you get a mega menu, and then you go to homelessness. So you can click on there. And if you scroll down, you should see the meeting agendas, and then the draft homelessness strategic plan framework. That's really what we've been working on over the last 2 meetings and today's meeting. And I mean, if you can scroll forward, keep going. Just want to identify that the plan does have, this isn't complete. This is really a framework. So it's intended to be a guide to help us develop a plan. And one more page. So there are your 7 goals that comprise the majority of the plan itself. Each of those goals includes supporting actions, who the lead entity would be, who are some partners, and what resources and what timeline. For example, in goal 1, it says reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness in Cloverdale by providing access to temporary and permanent housing solutions within Sonoma County. That's an area where, is the shelter appropriate, or are there other types of housing that might be provided to address the need of our homeless population? I wanted to mention here that, this is kind of where I think we would have a discussion around, where shelters, might fit in terms of our strategy. If we look at goal number 2, prevent and mitigate public health safety impacts of the community stemming from homelessness, I think that gets to, some of the issues that Chief Ferguson shared with us today. And there's about 7 different supporting actions that relate to implementing that goal, including how to address some of the impacts on both public property and private property. Goal number 3 is to implement programs to prevent homelessness among, existing residents or residents of Cloverdale. One I wanted to kind of speak to that's a current action step is, to implement a housing fund to assist Cloverdale residents who are at risk of becoming homeless. I think that kind of speaks to one of the comments I think by Leanne about, looking to our community to provide support. That would be a perfect avenue to pursue. and then identifying, community organizations as the key partner to help oversee that. Moving on, goal number 4 is to provide coordinated outreach and supportive services to homeless individuals and families that promote self-sufficiency and personal stability. Again, there's a number of supporting actions there, and this speaks to some of the models, the current kind of best practices on how you deliver services to folks that are experiencing homelessness. Again, what we're seeking with these goals at this point, in previous meetings, we did get through, I think, about goal 1 through 4, started talking about 5. And rather than pick it up immediately where we left off, we thought it was important to, take a look at these goals. It's an opportunity for the additional progress is made to, reframe them if necessary in the context of, some of the legal decisions, some of our efforts that have been made, and what are some of the current best practices, and also to specifically identify those target populations that we want to address with those goals. So, do we want to focus on, the folks that maybe are on the verge of becoming homeless? Do we want to focus on those folks? I think Margaret from Reach from Home mentioned there's 5 individuals, finding homes for those individuals, or do we want to tackle the more hard to get cases like the individual Chief Ferguson spoke of? So that's kind of where we want to be able to hone these goals in to identify, what's going to be recognized as making progress to our members of our community, and how do we identify that progress, including what organizations do we want to identify? So if folks are willing to step up and say, hey, I can take that on, I can help with that program, let's put them in the plan. I think a good example, it's put Nina on the spot at the chamber is, Nina works with the business community, is looking to the business community in terms of, what are their needs and what can they do to help address some of the impacts, and identifying that so that we're all working together and in unison, collaboratively and across the region to address homelessness. And then last but not least, defining, what are the resources needed to implement these steps. And there is quite a bit of funding available, in particular over the next year, some of which has been approved by the federal government and the recent Recovery Act, as well as by our governor and the state legislature. And we have to make a decision if that's funding we want to pursue and or utilize. I did want to note that tied to this issue of the county working on homelessness is that the Board of Supervisors is going to receive a report at their meeting on April 20th that is going to provide an update on some different models that the county can employ to more systemically address the issue of homeless, including looking at what's the appropriate model for governance, how do we optimize some of the programs around homelessness, and then also the kind of the housing coordination and access piece, and a whole host of other factors. So that's something to kind of keep track of and determine where we might plug that into our own strategic plan. So kind of the call to action, Chair Lands and Vice Mayor and members of the committee is I know it's been a little while, but take a look at this the draft framework that's on our website, as much as possible, providing input on the vision, the goals, the strategies, and the tactics, and including identifying organizations that can help. I think that's really where we're at in terms of trying to come up with a final draft that helps to reflect our collective input as a community. And we can certainly, this has been available on our website. Do our best to promote this, to encourage folks to and members of our community to step up, provide comments, and identify where they may be able to assist with addressing this from a comprehensive perspective. So Chair Lenz, that really kind of concludes the recap or overview of the strategic plan goals, and what we're asking are kind of the next steps to help finalize some of the or at least update the current draft framework to reflect the input from the community.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate that, and that was great stepping in and going right through these. That worked out perfect. Just for a quick time, we have 21 minutes left of this meeting. I want to make sure that we get out of here on time. Vice Mayor Cruz, first question.
Well, actually, what I want is to make a comment first to thank you for sending the invitation more than 2.5 weeks ago. And it is important that, yes, we continue to invite the community, but it's been out there for a while. So I thank you for that initiative. At the same time, I appreciate Angela's comment about we taking care of ourselves. But unfortunately, due to funding restrictions, there's a lot of money that comes to the region, and we need to be part of that region to be able to advocate and to bring that funding to Cloverdale for us to engage and to put into and to implement what we want to see in Cloverdale. So we do have to continue to work as a partner with the Board of Supervisors, with our supervisor in District 4, and with all the other stakeholders. We need to value the investment of Reach for Home in the community, because it does keep many safe, and especially children. And we cannot control who buys what, where, and especially when they are good and productive citizens who are residing in our community and who have children in our schools and so on. So we need to be able to have a voice, and I plan to continue to be a voice to advocate for funding for Cloverdale, and especially for us to develop a program to really assist those individuals with mental health issues and with substance abuse. This is key to our success as a community, and it is key for us to continue to be an example to be emulated in the county. And the issue of dealing with resiliency has to include homelessness, because we cannot address all the different issues and all the different emergencies that we have in the community unless we also include our homeless and people at the brink of homelessness into our plans. So thank you, City Manager, Chair Lance, and all the community. Your concerns and your comments are taken very seriously, and they are very present every time we go to any meeting that requires a voice for Cloverdale. So thank you to all.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other comments from the group? I don't see any hands yet.
Chair
Please,
Lance,
Gavin,
I'd like to just kind of piggyback on what David was mentioning. What we were attempting to do was to go through each one of the supporting actions at the last meeting, and with the community involved, to try to see if those made sense for Cloverdale, and to see if those were of interest to anybody in the community who wanted to take any of those on, and maybe even just whittle it down, because 38 is quite a lot. So if I would like to hear from the group, if that approach you would like for us to continue. I think we got to about goal 3 or 4, like David said, after which we wanted to hand out a ranking sheet to everyone who was participating to see what the interest was in trying to implement any of those supporting actions around the goals.
And may I ask, Kevin, if that is something that could be put on the city webpage, so that other members of the community who are concerned and engaged in this situation could also have a voice.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe there's a better way of doing it than, taking the time to go through each one as a group. But I'm definitely open to suggestions. But I think our idea was really to try to make it as Cloverdale centric as possible. And really just whittle down those supporting actions and try to, maybe have, if any group was interested again, and maybe they could report back in the future meetings on how they're doing with their particular supporting action for the goal.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate that. I know that our demographics in Cloverdale are different than anyone else in this county, whether it be financially or however it's made up culturally. Everything here is different than anywhere else. And so it's really hard for us to compare ourselves to the rest of the county or go lockstep with them. We have to work as a partner, but as our own individual partner with them, for our own individual needs. Let's see here. I thought I saw Nina. Were you wanting to make a comment? I saw you turn off your microphone for a minute, please.
I just wanted to say that what we're doing here, and we are one small part of this community, but whatever I can do to push it out there and let people know about this task force, I'm here. I mean, I'll do whatever I need to do to get it out there. And I will, when I do see things on social media that involve homeless, whether it's an encampment of one or a multitude, I go to the people that can help figure that out. So it's not going to answer the questions, but it'll help push it along. So anyway, and I'm here as a liaison for our business community, and they know that individually. And I'm also happy to go and be proactive and contact them if need be. So don't be afraid to, call me, write me. Smoke signals, no smoke signals, forget that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. You're more than a liaison, you're more of a godsend to this town. I'll just say that.
Oh, thank you.
Please, you're next.
I was just going to recommend that perhaps putting those goals into some sort of like a Survey Monkey and putting it on that website, David, that you were showing earlier, and then community members could go in and kind of rank what they think to help versus like it might be hard to have a big conversation, but if people can like rank and maybe have an open field at the bottom to put other ideas in case they weren't captured, just a thought.
Great idea, Margaret. Like a survey instrument to solicit more community feedback and input on the proposed supporting actions and see what.
Yeah, maybe even have a ranking. You can in like a Survey Monkey have it so community members could like rank what their thoughts are as the highest priority to lowest priority, and that might then kind of bubble up the top 5 or 10 to then kind of take a look at and start dissecting.
Thank you, Margaret. Any other comments from our group? And I don't see any hands from the public. Anyone in the attendees list have any comments they want to make? Please raise your hand. Oh, I see a hand pop up. Leanne.
Hi. There was one thing that I wanted to ask about, or maybe you guys can look into. Back in the county's budget, there was a mobile support team, a mental health crisis that's been active in the county. It didn't go as far. I don't think it went past Windsor maybe, but apparently the county was using the money, PG&E settlement money that they got, and they were going to expand that unit to include Cloverdale. And I haven't heard anything else about that. So that may be a solution to help take some of that money that's been going out for the city. And Chief Ferguson too, I'm sure your team would like some help in that area. So if you can find out about that mobile support team. Also, yeah, I think it's just we got to get together, because there definitely are some other solutions that I know are very drastically needed in this community, like emergency shelters. And I have some known success in case studies on that, personal and elsewhere. And that's what I'm just saying. You need more. And I know I'm not the only one that has these ideas, you guys. I mean, so emergency shelters, I thought, we might, be a location that can provide a parking shelter. I don't know. And that could be maybe something that we can, like Todd said, we need to be our own separate entity, but also work coordinated where we can, but not completely enthralled, because we're going to spend a lot of time duplicating programs if we do that and just go specifically what we need. And I think with the community input, we're going to be able to narrow that down and let Chief Ferguson do his dang job, and his officers do their job and use the resources we can. But I'm telling you right now, we don't need the government's money. I tell you, our organization, once it got out there and people saw the impact that we were having, we were getting money from people from all over the place. Individual citizens, people that own businesses, within Virginia Beach and elsewhere. We're just like, what do you guys need? What do you guys need? You guys are doing something right. So I don't be using these scare tactics that we have to, walk hand in hand with the county, the federal government, ever. There's money that we can get lots of other places, individuals also. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Okay, with no other comments, we'll move on to just public comments. So we'll kind of go around the horn here and see. Nina, you can go first since your hand is already up.
Okay, I just have a quick question. I think the piece that's missing here is the mental health component. We need somebody involved with this effort that can close that loop. Anyway, and I am appreciative of being part of this organization. And again, you can contact me individually, email, phone, whatever. And if there's anything I can do to make it better, faster.
Thank you, Nina.
More comprehensive. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I know Debbie Howell is chomping at the bit to get her new programs open at her new building. And so hopefully we can make that happen as quickly as possible so that she can have the mental health side of it there in an office in the middle of our town, just begging to help everyone. Debbie, please, I see your hand next. Go for it.
Just on the mental health front, one of the things that I would advocate for the community members is attend the Sonoma County Mental Health Board meetings. There's one coming up April 20th. I think it's 5 to 7 p.m. And I think, our voices need to be heard, that there are no mental health services up here for the severely and persistently mentally ill. We provide mental health services, but it is not focused on severely and persistently mentally ill. And that is a county responsibility. So it would be great if we had more participation. I attend, they're painful to sit through. So I would love company, but it's necessary. If we're going to get heard, it's necessary.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate that. And if you have the link or the date and time for that meeting, could you attach it on an email to this group? I know that there's the group that went out. It'd be great for everyone to have. I would love to attend that.
Will do.
Anyone else have anything that they would like to say as public input right now? Any other directions we want to go, things you want to see? David and Kevin have done a phenomenal job drafting this, and it's a good, bare bones start to this, and I love it. So I think we're headed in the right direction. Anybody? Nobody from? Oh, I see two hands. It looks like in the public. Sue, I don't know if you could bring in Sue, whoever that is, please.
Yes, Chair Lance, and I know Margaret had her hand up.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Margaret, please go ahead while we're waiting.
And actually, I just wanted to just let everybody know that we're working with Providence Health right now. I know that their mobile unit, this is just more of an FYI because we're seeking community input. Providence Health is bringing up their mobile unit. I believe they're starting on Mondays. I'm working with them, Reach for Home is working with them and making sure to collaborate so it's not an overlap or duplicative services, but we also have our community health and wellness mobile unit. And truly the mobile unit is for the community. Each community we know is different. And so, you know, it's a land yacht. It has an exam room in the back. It has a table for mental health appointments or for coordinated entry or for anything that the City of Cloverdale thinks would be helpful for services that are in a mobile form that could be more accessible to people who are unsheltered. We are open to any and all ideas. We're putting, you know, everybody's logos on it that want to have logos on it. I mean, it's really just a community mobile health and wellness unit. So we would just love ideas of what might be helpful to have on that mobile unit as resources for our unsheltered. So just wanted to let everyone know that that's coming, and also wanted to let people know that we are definitely partnering with Providence, and it's something that will complement what they're doing, not overlap it. We have an LVN on staff that can help concierge people. We work with Debbie. We work a lot with Alexander Valley and getting people over there and that sort of thing as well. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate it. Okay, Sue, still up? Irene, if you don't mind?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sue, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yep, I just did. Thank you. Thank you all for hosting this meeting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear the beginning part of it. So if my question has been addressed or is not in a line, I apologize in advance. But as I hear so much and the continued reminder of the issue of mental health and addiction with homeless, it brings me to this very dry time of year and lighting of fires under our bridges. And so what is the city doing to address that specific concern for a citizen, where while I appreciate the need to build one's own fire, we are again stepping back saying these are people that are using drugs, that have mental health issues, who are now lighting fires in places that are incredibly dry. So we can't use our fireplaces, we can't use our backyard fire pits. We have people lighting fires who, for all the reasons that we're talking about, need help. It's a great concern for Cloverdale. I know I'm not the only citizen who's very concerned, not just in the winter, but as we're getting drier and drier and drier. So what sort of things are we able to do other than citizens noting it, calling the fire department, and we're all becoming aware of that? So I just wanted to bring that up. And if it's not an appropriate time, I apologize, but I just thought it's really important to address this.
Chief, would you like to handle that one, or it'd be better?
Yeah, well, to the best of my abilities, I'll try to answer, because a lot of these do occur outside of our city limits. Of course, out in the river, I think is the most common area where you might have this experience. So there are times where we have responded, even though it was outside our jurisdiction, to try to assist with, first and foremost, having the individuals put the fire out. There could be citation processes, but do understand that is separate from removing somebody's encampment and dealing with the other issues that come with that. This would be a separate situation where you'd be cited for the fire, and it may not ultimately end in an arrest and transportation down to jail. It wouldn't fall high on that radar of a threshold to keep you, if that makes sense. But I know that we have responded in circumstances like that, but I would continue to encourage anybody who sees that to call the appropriate resource whenever you see that.
Thank you, Chief. Is that a good answer for you, Sue?
I just heard it's out of our jurisdiction. I'm not talking about moving encampments. I'm just talking about, are there larger ways that we can start to address this important concern? I understand that by providing services to people and the larger problem changing, but in the interim, besides if you're down there and see a fire, what sort of other things can be done? What is being done in other cities and other counties to address this important issue? Santa Cruz Beach comes to mind, lighting fires. What can we do to start saying this is just really, this can't happen here?
I personally, if you don't mind, Chief, I'll just say real quick, the entities that are involved, or the jurisdictions, it's not just the sheriff's office. Now you're getting into Fish and Game, you're getting into state park areas, depending on where that fire is at, because we have all of them around our area. You have the even the Railway Association, like the NCRA. So I would be, if they're on the riverbed, I'd be contacting the county, I'd be contacting Fish and Game, I'd be contacting entities that can actually do something about it other than us that are assisting. Those ones can actually, if they start getting enough letters and enough phone calls, they might actually want to do something about the actual problem versus, you know, just the Band-Aid scenario here.
Thank you.
And Chair Lands, if I can just to add, I think it is a very good comment, very valid, you know, especially given the concerns about the impacts of wildfire on our community. There is a strategy supporting action on page 18 of the draft framework that is at least targeted towards this. Susan is accurate that some cities are trying to address this through, you know, very focused initiatives. As the chief alluded, you know, sometimes you have to treat it as separate issues. One is, you know, the fire itself and, you know, who lit it, who's responsible, and the appropriate citation. But often, you know, it's related to an encampment. And so is there one management approach is addressing it through, you know, a specific encampment initiative that is intended to restrict homelessness within you know, high fire severity zones, which, you know, we have a lot of around Cloverdale, and, you know, maybe there's certain areas where you target enforcement to a greater extent, again, to try to discourage those encampments in those locations because they do have a higher fire hazard. So it is challenging to decouple it from the encampment issue, but there is a supporting action in the plan, and you know, I think that's an area where, you know, we could probably look at, you know, what are some of the other best practices that communities are now using to try and address that issue because of the concern about our public safety.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Sue, for the questions and comments. The next is going to be Renee Rowe. You are up.
Thank you. One other thought, just as we go through today's meeting, is a 2.5-hour meeting seems a bit excessive. I'm watching all the body language of those of you that are on camera right now. So I definitely would suggest, just because I conduct a lot of meetings for my day job, is to cut these meetings down to about an hour and then have different groups that have action committees in between there. So that when we get together, you know, for updates, that we're actually seeing some action push forward between each meeting and making progress, because I've been on enough of these meetings to see we're not making a lot of progress. We're doing a lot of talking. It would be great to actually have those action items and have the meetings themselves manageable to about an hour would be kind of welcome, I think. And then also the second part of that would be to have, you know, evening meetings. So an hour and evening meetings, is that possible? Has that been discussed?
Okay.
We have had meetings, and Chair and Vice Mayor, you know, seek your direction if we want to try to have targeted, you know, evening or later in the afternoon meetings.
You know, David, in my opinion, I think that once we get, if we're going to go the route of the Survey Monkey or a survey for the public to see what the ultimate like top 10 goals are or anything along those lines, if we're looking in that direction, then I would suggest one of our meetings, once we figure out those top 10, that it gives it at least the opportunity for them to have it at a different time in case there's a different attendees that want to see. But for the next meeting, I would say we stay with where we are on the next meeting, because that's what's going to bring, if we can get it done in time, the goals, so that we can see what they are and get it properly agendized so that we're actually ready to go. If you have other ideas, Vice Chair or Vice Mayor, I'd like to hear.
I think perhaps once it's established that there's going to be a survey and how it's going to be promoted and so on, and the deadlines for that, perhaps staff can make a a summary of the results and so on, and we can be meeting to present the results and how it would be addressed. Perhaps we do need to have an evening meeting. I understand that many of the people on the call work kind of 7 to 6. We are working 7 to 7 anymore. Many meetings at 7 o'clock in the morning, especially the homeless meetings. But yeah, but it would be when we have a little bit more results. I think that would be, because we don't want people to get desperate because we are just talking. We need to see what has happened in other meetings, what allocations of funds have been made, what's working, wasn't working, and how, because right now we're kind of transitioning into a different mode of work again, away from Zoom. So I think we will be able to have more results for the public down the road.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And with referring to the 2.5-hour meeting, I agree, Renee. We all start to get their eyes glazing over and falling apart here. But the good part about that is the first half of this meeting was trying to figure out who anyone was and which part of this role they take. And so I think that the next meeting, as we really progress into this is only our 3rd meeting, I believe, we're really going to start seeing some results and narrowing down what we do to make this work, because I'm not one that's about just talking. I'm not a big committee guy. I'm about action, but you have to have it honed in a little bit. And I think that's where we are right here with the leaders of the city, get the public involved in the next part, and then we're going to just, make this happen. And I think that we're all on the same page with that we don't want to just sit around and talk. I don't like hearing myself talk, and I don't like sitting on a Zoom meeting. I'm done with these things. So I agree with you, the shorter the better, but as we hone it in, it's going to take a little more time.
And there's always, Mr. Chair, there's always going to be a moment when we need to do legal updates, and that takes time. And,
absolutely.
And we must know that, because we don't want to get sued by anyone. We don't have the money for that.
Thank you, Renee. We'll definitely take that into consideration. There will be, and I'm sure, an evening meeting coming up to make sure everyone gets involved at different times of the day, so that all aspects are heard from everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, and I don't see any more comments. So I think we are coming to an end. Is there anything else, David or Kevin or Vice Mayor, anyone? Anything?
Yeah, I think that really concludes the agenda for today. I think there's some clear direction, really looking at these strategic actions, and I hope the community takes the opportunity to download the PDF on our website. If they want it in Word, we're happy to provide it. Prioritize, and we'll work on a survey to help do that, and hopefully we can be prepared to bring that back at the next meeting and to be able to roll that out.
Thank you, sir. And I'll make sure to do my part to make sure that we get information out to the public in different ways, so that hopefully we can have more participation. Yes, Vice Mayor, please.
Yeah, we need to energize the community to really participate in these surveys that the city puts out, because there was a survey for water, there was a survey for parks, there was a survey for this, and we get minimal participation. It is so important, because we cannot hold as many meetings as we would like, and somehow we need to help each other complete all these surveys so that we could have a true voice from the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who participated today or came and watched and listened. I appreciate everyone. Our next meeting is scheduled for May 11th at 1 to 3:30. It will be on Zoom. As soon as it comes out with the link and everything, I will get it on social media. It'll go out to the group with the email. And if anyone has any questions, my phone number is very easy to find. I have email through the city, anything you can do. So thank you so much, and you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.